good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, you thirsty bunch of beer drinkers, whenever and wherever you're tuning in from. I hope that you've been enjoying this here beer podcast, catching up on the 12 episodes we've dropped so far. We're having a blast doing it, sharing stories and taking you behind the scenes with some amazing people. Be sure to let us know, we'd love to hear from you, what episode you like so far and what you want to see in the future. Drop us a line at podcast@greatlakesbeer.com. Today on the pod, we have an old friend of the brewery joining us in studio, Mr. Cass Enright, who I've dubbed for this podcast the Ideas Guy, and you're going to find out why soon enough. Cass and I go way back, and by way back I mean like 2007, when there was only a handful of people writing about the beer industry here in Ontario. Cass was one of them, with his bartowel.com site that featured a lively forum where fans of well-made beer came to discuss what they were drinking, where they were drinking it, and how to get it. The forum was very active with members from all over the province and was a place people came to learn more about beer. We became friends through this site, going on to create Toronto Beer Week together, working on events and consulting with the government on Liquor Licensing Act changes, and most importantly, we used to drink a lot together. And over the years, Cass has gone on to make a significant impact on the beer scene here in Ontario in a number of ways, which you'll hear about later in this interview. From his Free Our Beer campaign to the Golden Tap Awards, importing beer, the Bar Towel Radio, Brewers Backyard events, Ontario Beer Delivery Index, and the old Cass Enright Saloon League days, Cass deserves a big slap on the back. Did you hear that? And some proper acknowledgement for being such a great ambassador for beer here in the province. We're going to get into all of that and more with the guy who never stops dreaming about the next beer move. But first, I'm going to crack a Great Lakes lager and hear from our friends at Toronto Festival of Beer. Hang tight.
Toronto's Festival of Beer returns to Bandshell Park at Exhibition Place between July 26th and 28th. Come to TFOB and enjoy the best of beer and beverage, showcasing over 400 varieties of products, the best of bites, eats, treats, and more. And the best beats on the Bandshell stage, including headliners Cypress Hill, Josh Ross, Taking Back Sunday, all rocking the Bandshell stage. Don't judge, just enjoy. TFOB, July 26th to 28th. Tickets available at beerfestival.ca.
Well, hello there, Mr. Cass Enright.
Hello, Troy.
We finally got you here. It's been 13. This is the 13th episode, but I think I asked you like when we hit number 2 to get you on the show. We have a lot of history and we wanted to get you on here. Thank you for coming.
I feel very lucky to be on number 13.
There you go. And you came by the brew pub, or not the brew pub, but the brewery before coming over to the studio to record this. What did you drink?
Well, I had a Tasty Miami Vice, the first time I've had it this season.
And what do you got in your hand now?
I got another one.
There you go.
So
serendipitous.
Let's open this up.
Go nuts. You're looking good these days.
Thank you very much.
You got a nice bright red shirt on. You match the octopus at the brewery. You pointed that out. So let's dive into the background of everything first. Tell people who you are. I kind of mentioned all the things you've been involved with, but who are you? What do you do now? And what are you up to today?
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Troy. It is a thrill, even though it's taken a while for me to be a part of the podcast. So
Between two fermenters?
Between two fermenters. It's amazing listening to your description of me because I had forgotten a number of those things and I started to write them down to reference them again. I've been in beer a long time. It's been a passion of mine ever since the university days. When I was at U of T and I started a beer club back then. And I've long just thought of myself as a beer promoter, kind of the way I described myself, just like a concert promoter. I don't play the music, I don't brew the beer, but I try to bring it to the people. And that's what I've always done over the years, starting with Bar Towel, as you mentioned, which was Ontario's first, and I guess still only discussion forum about beer.
There's Reddit, and we'll touch on that later. Right. But no, your point is well made that it probably is the only forum dedicated to 100% beer.
Well, I mean, I'm old now, and the Bartel predates all social media, and so when Bartel's heyday, that was what beer social media was. was
People went there, as I said, to learn about new products. They went there to learn about new bars and restaurants that were serving craft beer, imported beers, how to get them.
It was to converse about beer. It was to speak to the industry. It was talk to other beer drinkers, learn about new things. I mean, those things still happen. They just happen in different forms. And that was really the thing that it was needed, because back then digital marketing for beer was almost non-existent.
Breweries would send beer to a blogger.
Yeah.
They would write about it, and hopefully they had some traction and people would pick it up. But to your point, brewery owners and brewers and salespeople, they went to Bar Towel to see what was happening and to talk about their products. It was a place that they could promote themselves as well.
Yeah, it was basically the pulse of the beer scene in Ontario. And, we had events and there were festivals that would take place, but, their beer bars, breweries weren't nearly as dense as they are these days around the province. So things were quite few and far between. And the Bar Towel became a place where everybody could gather virtually and talk about beer. And that was really the springboard to all the other beer things that I did over the years, really always just to help promote the industry, raise awareness of Ontario craft beer, get people drinking it, and raise the quality of Ontario craft beer. Because we, as beer fans where we would travel and taste American IPAs and things like that, we would come home and encourage the brewers here to do that. And over time they did. And the beer scene here not only grew exponentially, but also grew in quality.
So you're taking credit for that?
A little bit, I guess.
So the Bar Towel, you said it's been around, it predates social media, digital platforms. When did it start? How did it start? And why did you start it? I know you started a beer club at U of T, but why did you start the Bar Towel?
Well, I'll explain the story, because for those of a certain age, you'll get the reference. But when I was in university, I was writing about beer for my college newspaper at the U of T. And I had a beer club that I was running at the same time. And I wanted to do a newsletter for the beer club. And at the time, indie magazines were called rags. Was kind of like a nickname for what they were. And so the Bar Towel was the official rag of my beer club, which was sort of a, double pun with, beer and then sort of this like indie newsletter scene. And it was originally a printed newsletter way back when. And when I graduated, I was out of school. I was no longer running the club. And so I bought bartowel.com, the domain name, in 1998.
1998.
Yeah. It was the first domain name I ever owned.
Okay.
The time it cost like $80, which was a lot of money out of school. And then in 1999, I started blogging. And so I was the first Ontario beer blogger.
Were you blogging under the bartowel.com?
On bartowel.com. Okay. I set up a beer blog where I basically consolidated news about what was happening in the beer scene. So like you could go to this bar and find this pale ale. And then in 2001, I believe, I started the forum. And that was just a way to, encourage conversation on the site, because forums were a thing, but they were emerging. There was really nothing about Ontario beer. And like I said, social media still was years away.
And in the US, there was Beer Advocate and
There's
Rate
Beer Advocate,
but that came
Rate Beer.
After yours as well?
It's hard to, I can't really remember the dates, but like there was like realbeer.com and like some of those old sites. But yeah, Beer Advocate and Rate Beer were kind of some of the other community sites that were big that I think started around the same time. But there was nothing that was Ontario specific.
So you built this. Were you coding, or was this just like a platform that you integrated, or how did you get that up and running?
Well, the original Bartowel blog, I hand coded, the entire thing. It didn't even have a CMS. That was not a thing back then. This is how long ago.
I don't even know what a CMS is. So
well, it's called content management system. Anyway, that's for another podcast. I hand coded the entire Bartowel blog, and then there was a forum software that's still the forum to this day. It's called PHPBB, which is a bulletin board software that's open source, and it still goes, and it's still used around the web, because there are still communities around the internet that stick together on forums, because as we know, social media has gone through ebbs and flows.
Find information quick.
Conversations are sometimes a bit toxic. Yeah. It's hard to find information. They're closed walled gardens of social platforms. And so, I still maintain that the bar towel, even though it's not nearly as active as it used to be, it's still going. And there's still people there talking about beer, which I'm, very pleased with after all these years.
Do you know in its heyday how many members you had?
I looked back. I think our peak year was around 2008, which is what you mentioned in your intro. Yeah. It was around the time of the Westy release.
West of Electron?
Yeah. The Westy Frenzy, as I called it. And I think we had like 20,000 posts in the calendar year.
Oh, wow.
Which was like a lot. Just like if you do the math, it's a lot per day. And that's just talking about Ontario beer.
I first discovered Bar Towel probably around 2007 when, or probably 2006. I was living in Halifax. And I think if my memory serves me right, and I do drink a lot, so it's fuzzy at times, but I submitted a request to you. We didn't know each other, saying, hey, do you want an article on Halifax? All the pubs where you can drink craft beer at. And I think that was my first ever blog post, if you will, but it was on Bar Towel. And I know a couple other people had started their beer writing stuff with you through that. Greg Clow, Rob Symes.
Greg edited our the news section. So predating Canadian beer news, he did news editing for Bar Towel. And over the years, I had a number of sort of guest bloggers because, again, everything I do is always just for the good of the Ontario beer scene. So I think when you contacted me and you wanted to provide an article, I was like, let's anything that we can do to get the, information of good beer out there. And a number of people wrote for the site. Those articles are all still there.
Really?
So
I can go back and check and find.
What I did is I kind of split the domains. So bartowel.com is just the discussion forum.
Okay.
But if you go to thebartowel.com, that's all of the articles going back to day one. So all the news that Greg edited, the stuff that Rob did, the articles of yours is probably still there.
That article, I can remember, it ruined my life because I posted that. It went up on Bar Towel. I used that to get a little writing gig at a publication in Halifax about bars, restaurants, and beer, which led to writing in Taps Media for Taps Beer Magazine. And then I said, well, I might as well do this for a living. So thanks a lot for hosting that. But I can remember my first real... So you said it wasn't toxic like it is today on social media, but I can remember a post that I made, and it's not about me, but I have to tell the story, and you'll probably remember. I went on there saying how much I enjoy Keith's, and that was kind of like my gateway beer, and people just jumped on me because I was brand new to the craft scene. I was living in I wasn't even in Toronto, and all these people were like, oh, you got to go to this bar to drink the best beers. And I just remember getting shit on that, and I was like, I don't know if I want to come back to this forum, but over the years, we've used it for publicizing events and new beer releases from Great Lakes. But so at the height, you were saying about 20,000 posts a year. Now I know you've tried to bring it back in the last year. You've tried to bring the conversation back to the site. How has that gone?
Well, first thing is I'm definitely going to update the website to take credit for your beer career. So I'm going to do that. And then, it's funny. Like I realized that I think most of, digital habits have moved on, right? And social media sort of took over online conversation. But, it's funny when I think back to those days and the things that people would get upset about, it feels like very much a simpler time. And social media these days is not always a great place. And my observation is that a lot of breweries these days avoid conversation altogether online because it doesn't always end well. And we had a good run where there was like respectful conversation between consumers and the industry that you just wouldn't see these days.
Yeah, a name that a lot of today's drinkers wouldn't remember, but Perry Mason
Yeah.
was very vocal on that site, and there was an importer who was very vocal on
Yep.
your site.
Yeah.
Mike Lackey actually posted the original Crazy Canuck Pale Ale recipe.
Well-
so if you do some digging under the home brewing site, you might find that original recipe.
GLB talked about Cascapalooza on the website during the early days. I was listening to your podcast with Rob, and the news about Bose broke on Bar Towel. But basically all I was trying to do last year was I thought, yeah, I just wanted to let the members know that we're still going, right? And I'm not going to say that Bar Towel is going to replace social media. But a lot of people have left some of the social media channels, and I feel like they don't always know where to go.
Yeah, like there's Discord and stuff like that now, but this is a way to say, hey, this is only beer. This is, it's been there since 2000. Did the forum go live? 2001 is when it started. 2001. Which is
Yeah. I mean, I wrote an email to the membership, and I used a term that's not mine, but it was called, in social media, there's a collective action problem, which is a lot of people don't know where to go. They don't like a particular platform. So then then there isn't a mass congregation anywhere else. So people have tried like Blue Sky and
Discord,
Reddit. Or, Reddit's probably it's the most successful probably discussion forum that's still around. But a number of the other, sort of alternatives to social platforms haven't really taken hold with beer drinkers.
And we were talking to Jordan on this podcast, Jordan St. John, a couple episodes ago. There's not really anyone writing about beer or blogging about beer where you could have comments on the post where you could you could follow up and talk and have a discussion about that. And that's something the Bar Towel was always fun with, because you could get into a very fun discussion with people in real time behind a screen.
Beer, I mean, I've always thought beer just brings people together. Beer is meant to be fun. It's meant to be social. So the Bar Towel is meant to be kind of like a virtual bar, right? You can come, you can hang out, you can chit chat about beer. Doesn't get too serious. And it was a good run. I still think up to a certain time of Ontario beer history, it was kind of like it's the archive of what happened
For sure.
here. And
my blog is still alive, and I went back to look at all the articles that you were mentioned in, and you get nostalgia. It's so cool to see how the craft industry really grew. And Bar Towel, as I said off the top, was a big part of that. Yeah. And we're recording a podcast today, and before podcasts were even out there, you had a thing, Bar Towel Radio. What was that about?
Well, it was an original Ontario beer podcast. And one of the things I've always wanted to do was to just try new things and get ahead of the curve when it comes to beer content. So I was the first Ontario beer blog. I had the first Ontario beer community. And I believe I had the first dedicated Ontario beer podcast. And again, back then, there was no podcast platforms. I hand-coded all of the RSS feeds for the episodes. And I just was doing this, chatting about beer.
Yeah.
And, it was really just a way to be more interactive. It was to take things out of the, text realm of the forum and, have a more conversational format. And I did that for a number of years from, I guess, 2000 and God, I don't even know the dates, 2005, maybe through 2016 or so. And I spoke with Ontario brewers. I spoke with brewers and beer folks abroad in different beer cities. It was a really cool experience, and it was just a way to bring beer content to the world in a new way. And that's why my latest thing is video, because that's where I've gone next.
Well, let's just move right over to it. It's what's a quick one?
A quick beer.
A quick beer. So tell us about that. After you take a sip of that delicious Miami Vice.
Well, I'm enjoying this Miami Vice quite quickly, actually, because how delicious it is. Well, it's really an evolution of what I did with my podcast. And I realized that this day and age, people's attention spans aren't very great. And
What?
yeah, exactly. People look at things fast. They scroll quick. They don't necessarily engage in long-form content.
Unless it's between two fermenters podcast.
Unless it's between two fermenters. And I used to do podcasts that were upwards of an hour, 2 hours long. And in my recent years in my career, I've done more video production, editing. And so I wanted to combine that into my beer passion. And so I came up with an idea that, even though I'll be the first to admit that I don't have the personality for it, but it was like, imagine a Bourdain travel show, but about beer. And that was kind of the concept. And so I piloted a video idea during the pandemic where I'd visit beer cities. So I'd go outside of I've done some in Ontario, but predominantly outside of Ontario, chat with brewers, visit bars and breweries, and create very short form videos, sort of 3 to 5, 6 minutes, where I would talk about that beer scene. And it brings together sort of my love of beer, but also of travel and visiting some new places, and really, but also a way to showcase other beer destinations that are easily accessible from Toronto and sort of the GTA area. And I've been really happy with the results, and I've forged a number of different partnerships with different cities around Ontario, including ones within Ontario. I did a 4-part series from London last year where I met with Beer Lab, Milos, Forked, Storm, and Anderson. Nice. Meeting with all of them, showcasing the beer scene in London. And it's just another way that I feel like I can bring my passions into creating content to promote good beer for all.
And I want to just point this out. I think I'm correct in saying this. You're not making money off this. This is a hobby, or is this?
I am not making money off of it, although I will say that I
want to maybe one day.
Well, I've never tried to make money off of beer. I have a career that's not beer that pays my bills. Beer's always has been a passion of mine, and everything I do in beer is for the love of it. But I bring sort of my expertise from my marketing career into beer.
I thought you were a lion tamer. No, oh no, you're
that's my retirement plan.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
But I have, if for full disclosure, I have actually partnered with a number of different tourism boards.
Oh, good.
For a quick beer, and they've assisted me with accommodation. And I find that to be quite helpful, because then it, helps with the trips, but then it also provides a little bit of legitimacy to, my videos, because in the case of Tourism London, I worked with them. They took the videos and posted them on their social. I posted them on mine. So it's kind of like a real celebratory piece that really shone a light on their beer scene.
And knowing you the way I know you from all these years, you like to travel. So to get some accommodations and some help, it helps for sure.
Yeah.
And now let's move over then to a quick beer that's still going. That's happening now. You can check it out.
You can go to aquickbeer.com.
Yep.
The website, or you can go to A Quick Beer. You can find us on YouTube, which is where all of our episodes are. We just released our first of 2 parts from Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Oh, nice. Bell's
is in there.
Very good.
We did a full tour of the brewery, plus visited the cafe downtown. And then
it's a beautiful brewery, isn't it?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And then you'll be able to see in the future, I've got episodes coming from Lansing, Michigan, which is Michigan's state capital, and Cleveland.
Very good.
Yeah.
You didn't go to that other one, did you? Oh man,
no
we will no. We might have to end this right now. Events. So you talked about with Bar Towel. There's been a bunch of things, offspring things that have happened with it. One of them were Brewers Backyard. First it was the brewery market, then it became the Brewers Backyard. tell us all about that. Why the hell aren't they happening anymore? And any chance of them coming back. So tell us about it first, what it was.
Sure. Well, I've always loved going to festivals. It's a great way to be a part of the community, meet people, drink with people. And I always thought that there was a better model for beer festivals. And what I mean by that is a lot of beer festivals have high admission fees. Often they are 19 plus, so they're not accessible for families. And some of them have just been, the vibe is about just sort of getting drunk. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I thought there was going to be a better way. And so I devised sort of this model, which is fairly simple. And really it was sort of shocking that nobody had done it. But basically a festival that was just a drop-in. Mm-hmm. You could come by.
Like a pop-up.
Yeah. You could come by. There was no tickets. It was free to attend. Families were welcome, so you could bring the kids. You could just have a beer, and then you could go. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a commitment like many festivals where you feel
$45 a ticket,
obligated to
$5
stay all night. Yeah. And we did the events during the day, and they were a big hit. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed doing them, and it was a way to extend, sort of, like I said, my passion for beer into the event world, and meet a lot of new brewers, because during that time, a lot of breweries were opening up. I knew a number of the brewers from the old bar towel days, but then there were so many new ones opening, and this was a way that I could work with them, get to know them, and meet them. And really, to be blunt, they came to a close with the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Our last event was February 2020.
Oh,
on Family
Day weekend.
So it would have been about a month before the shutdown. Mm-hmm. And so for the longest time, I joked that it was the last beer festival before COVID hit, because I think it was, at least in Toronto. And it's really, in terms of them coming back, like I'd never rule them out, but they were a lot of work, mm-hmm. and costs of everything have increased. Mm-hmm. And running a festival is a lot of hard work
and what ifs.
It's a lot of what ifs. It's things like, you have to worry about things like the weather and just mm-hmm. people showing up or caring. But then it's like fees for garbage and security and costs of beer and food. And there's so many variables. Mm-hmm. And as great as they were, I was also constantly stressed out about them. Mm-hmm. And so COVID became a way for me to just put a pause on them. And again, like I said, never say never, but right now, I'm focusing my energies into
a quick
beer.
So those events, though, I think a lot of us that participated in them over the years, the breweries and the people that were there, like you said, you were doing them a lot differently than everyone else, where the beer was paid for. You paid for the beer, and then people paid you to get a pint or get a 12 ounce or 16, whatever it was. And it was just a nice welcoming atmosphere. We did the first ever one you did at the Brewers Backyard, at the Evergreen Brickworks on Canada Day weekend. And we got slammed. It was hugely popular. And a well-known fact for us, but maybe not for listeners, is that's where Fidel Castro's really broke out. He was there. He did a pop-up, and the next thing you know, this guy's all over the place. So I miss them. I think it would be great if you weren't so stressed and brought them back. But it was a really nice, it was almost like, how come no one's done these? And now that someone's done them, how come they're not being taken across the province? So I always wondered why we wouldn't see those in Hamilton and Barrie and London and Kingston. And
you just need somebody with the drive and the passion to make them happen. Mm-hmm. It's funny. It's not like I own a copyright on the concept of doing a beer festival during the day that's family friendly, that mm-hmm. has no admission fee. But we just don't really see that happen. And I know it's a strange time right now because like we said, it's sort of this period of inflation where, we have a lot of rising costs, and I'm sure it's hard to organize festivals. But I don't see why they couldn't come back with, passionate beer lovers that really care about beer, find a good location, and contact some breweries, bring them in. It doesn't have to be, our principle was never to try to be like a mega fest. We only had 3 to 6 breweries each time. It was small, it was intimate. We got busy, but it was meant to be more casual and easygoing and inviting. And I think it's definitely something where, the market in Ontario could see it come up again.
By you?
You never know.
You never know. Okay. Toronto Beer Week. So there's a lot of things we can touch on with you. You're involved in a lot of things over the years. And I just found out you're going to be the MC at this year's Ontario Craft Brewers Conference in Marketplace in Hamilton. Did you know that?
Well,
I'm confirming it. I think I think you're doing that.
Well, I love doing that kind of thing. I love hosting. I love MCing. And I've done it before. Numerous times. And so...
well, you're back. Congratulations.
So, yeah, I thought I would just raise my hand and let the team know that I was still around.
You took my job, but that's okay.
And I'd be happy to come out to Hamilton for the event this year. And... since I am responsible for your beer career, maybe I'm the one that should be doing the MCing.
Okay.
So
I graciously accepted my demotion for your promotion. So Toronto Beer Week, we started that in 2010. It's hard to believe.
Oh my God.
It was that long ago.
Here's it now, 2024.
2024.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah, we were on a flight back from Chicago.
We sure were. I still have the picture.
And there was 4 of us on that plane. Do you remember how empty that plane was? There was like 4 of us in a row.
Yeah.
But then you look over the seats and there was like maybe
there was nobody
8
there.
people, maybe 8 people in total.
I think we got the porter flight attendants to service like 3 rounds.
I think they did say something, if I'm not mistaken. We were in the air and they're like, well, you're up in the air. As soon as we kind of level off, you can have a beer. And we were like, well, just keep bringing the beers. As soon as you crack one, bring us another one. So we talked about starting something like Philadelphia had, like New York had. I think New York was before us.
It was a trend. SF Beer Week was
San Francisco
one.
and Vancouver.
Yeah. Philly Beer Week was one of the originals.
One of the originals. But we talked about that on that flight, and we decided, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to bring Toronto its first ever dedicated beer week. What do you remember most about that time? About all the years that we did it together?
Yeah. I remember that time as just being such a magical, time full of energy in the beer scene, right? Like it was a time of optimism. Everybody was getting into it. Drinkers were experiencing beer for the first time. New breweries were opening. Traditional breweries were doing new things. Bars were experimenting with changing their taps and trying out new beers. And I think we just hit that crest.
It was like the sweet spot. It was like,
yeah. And we came at a time where, there really wasn't anything. Well, there wasn't anything like it in Toronto.
No, there was festivals.
But nothing that sort of coalesced.
Said, hey,
across the city.
This is about craft beer. We called it Toronto Beer Week, not Craft Beer Week, because we wanted a lot of the big international Belgian brewery, well, not international, but Belgian breweries to come in and who are already here and do some exciting things. Beer dinners with like Dogfish Head, and
we just wanted good beer to permeate throughout the city, and we weren't precious around about that definition.
For the most part. No Keiths, no Stella.
No, your original.
I know
favorite,
my original.
Keiths.
Remember how we pissed off Labatt by saying no.
Yeah,
but then we made an exception for Goose Island.
For Goose, I know. Well, it was also a period where things started to get blurry quickly around what craft meant. But at the time, I just remember starting that out and just like the enthusiasm that we saw around the city from the breweries wanting to participate, the pubs and bars and restaurants that wanted to be a part of it, like how we just got all these events and such fun, creative things. And, you know,
like we had an opera night.
We had an opera night. We had all kinds of things. And it's, you know, it's sort of what makes me a bit sad is that not that Toronto Beer Week isn't really around anymore, but even that the legacy of those types of things don't really happen much anymore.
100%.
Yeah.
It's if people are going out to the bars, the pubs and restaurants, it's like a little small thing.
Yeah.
But we were driving people to the bar to go put your phone away.
Yeah.
And have a beer with someone and talk about the news of the day or the next beer you're going to have. And some of those events, like going to Volo, I was saying this, like $4 pints on Mondays back then, and promoting that. But the pub crawls you and I did, we used to do pub crawls for both the Ontario Craft Beer Week, but also Toronto Beer Week, which was the first and better one. But we did those, and we had a lot of people come out to those. We did the East versus West.
We had that's what I mean. We had so many creative things. We had like the East versus West pub crawl. We had the Golden Tap Awards that took place during Toronto Beer Week for those years. We had interesting collaborations. I mean, we would do Tudor tastings and dinners, like
beer dinners when they were a big thing.
Yeah.
We were doing like 9 days worth of different people would have a beer dinner in, say, the West End, and then the next would be downtown. The next night it might be the East or Scarborough. Like we even had some chains, not Mother Tucker, Smiths, I think it was called. They're long gone now, but they were in Scarborough. They were into it, and they were doing and showcasing craft beer. And so we really did put a team together that really just wanted, like you said, to elevate and bring about awareness to what's happening right in Toronto, but Ontario in general. We sold the company, and it was a company, but we didn't make any money off it. Again, it was like, you were doing this as a fun hobby and just to get the beer out there. We sold it to St. Joe's Media in 2018.
Yeah.
And you and I consulted with them for going into COVID. I think it was 2018 and 19 we consulted with them. But how depressing is it that they never ended up doing anything solid with it?
It's very sad. And, you know, I think back on that and I feel bad because I don't think we sold it to them truly believing that they would be a good partner.
Mm-hmm.
And
with the right intentions.
With the right intentions. And I don't think that I hope that they weren't penalized by the industry because they were a company versus us, where it was just a bunch of beer lovers doing it. But it is sad that, you know, beer weeks still happen. You know, I still see on social beer weeks around North America.
Guess which is coming to Toronto in September 28th to October 5th.
That OCB?
Great Lakes Beer Week.
Great Lakes Beer Week.
We brought it back last year.
Do you need any hosts?
Yeah, we
anything?
might need a host. Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to do some MC work, but I'll step back.
Okay, well, we know your stature on that. So,
I started to really feel for this, that we didn't have anything like it. We had all this, hundreds of events during a 9-day period. And a lot of people ended up saying, is it really needed? Is it really necessary? We have events all the time. Brewers are doing their own events. They're doing their own beer dinners and stuff. And we said, that's great. That's what we wanted to happen. We wanted all these breweries to go out and do their and grow, and but we also wanted to say, well, during this 9-day, we want to put Toronto on the map. You can come in from. We had people coming in from Scotland. We had people coming in from all over the world. They would come in for Toronto Beer Week and explore neighborhoods.
I never bought into that criticism for the same reason that just because we have cinemas doesn't mean that we shouldn't have TIFF, right? Like what Toronto Beer Week did was shine a spotlight during a concentrated period on the thing that we were most passionate about. And you see that all the time in all kinds of different facets of the world.
You're always good with the analogies.
That's right.
Marketing.
And, thank you. and so, you know, I remember that feedback that we heard, but to me, that didn't matter. What mattered was that we were doing something to grow the beer industry. That was the point. It wasn't about getting the people that were already super passionate about beer
100%
into beer.
That's right.
It was to get, like you said, the places like the Smiths, places that didn't always,
They might have had one or two
they
local
weren't
taps
sure
and-
what to do, right? Or people that weren't sure how to get into beer. This week gave not only licensees a chance to do something different, it gave people something that they could go out to experience and try some new beer in a sort of a festival type environment where they could learn about all kinds of new things
and try beers from literally all over the world too.
Try all kinds of beers in different types of events and event settings.
One of the best things we had, and this is, we're getting nostalgic here, but we had the city deem our event a municipal significance, that we were allowed to have bars and restaurants actually stay open until 4 a.m., which is, again, pretty cool. You hear it with like the big World Cups and some of the biggest events like FIFA and all that, but there we are. 9 people that have no real money and stake in it, just love, and we get the city for 9 days to turn into a beer mecca for.
It's a testament to the passion of the people that were on that team. You know, like not just you and I, but there was a number of other folks that really gave a lot into that.
Chris Goddard, John Bowden, who the original co-founder,
Rob, Gabe, like
George Milbrand, Maz, Nick Pashley, rest in peace, Craig Simmons. He passed away a couple of years ago.
Like we had a cross section of people from the industry and just passionate beer lovers. And we took something that was just a seed of an idea on that flight, and we turned it to something that was a citywide municipal significant event. And that was one of the proudest, sort of periods of my beer life was that stretch, because, when that week came around, and we timed it specifically to be after TIFF, basically to be in the wake of the party that is TIFF, to capitalize on that enthusiasm before winter sort of set in. It was amazing.
And we had students back, so we actually had things with Heart House at one point. And so there we go. I finally got someone on the show to talk about Toronto Beer Week, because it is, as you said, one of my brightest shining moments in craft beer and my history in beer. We do have some more things to talk about. Let's take a quick break and hear an ad. And then when we come back, I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. You cool?
Sounds good.
All right, hang tight.
Get ready for Four Winds Music Fest, July 12th to 14th at the amazing Riverstone Retreat in Durham, Ontario.
Catch awesome headliners like Bahamas, Joe Plaskett, Great Lakes Swimmers, and Tara Lightfoot.
Enjoy camping by the river, yoga, drumming, and of course, fresh GLB.
Tickets are flying, so grab yours now at fourwindsmusicfest.com.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. It's bringing back a lot of awesome memories of the glory years of the Ontario craft beer scene. Now we're losing a lot of breweries, and things are always in flux, and everyone's so busy it's hard to catch up. But this is really good, just to kind of go back over the glory years, like I said. I have a couple quick things before we get into the rapid fire. I changed my mind. I do this often, but I just remembered something you did years ago that was crazy, that was very, like, people loved it so much. You did a thing called the Anti-Saloon League. Was it Anti-Saloon League or just Saloon League?
It was called the Saloon League because it was a play off of the Anti-Saloon League, which was something from Prohibition.
Yes. So this is where you would invite people, doesn't matter where they came from or who they were. You had to bring something that you couldn't drink in Ontario. And so there was kegs of, I think there was Sierra Nevada before Sierra Nevada was in Ontario, which it's not anymore. But I went to North Carolina and I brought back a keg of Saison DuPont that you couldn't find in Ontario. And I brought back a local brewery. I can't remember. I think it was called Fat Rabbit or Rabbit something, but it was a lambic. They did like a lambic. And those were some pretty fun days. You want to talk about that for a second?
Sure. Well, I guess the secret's out because I kept it under wraps for a long, long time.
Oh, come on. It was in the newspaper at one point.
But it was never mentioned. I did anonymous interviews. I came up with a pseudonym.
It was me that did this. It was my idea.
Yeah, I actually had a pseudonym that I used for some of the media interviews that talked about it.
All right. Well,
and so, but yeah, like, I mean, it was born out of kind of, I had this period where I was like feeling like disenfranchised by the whole import system in Ontario. I still am to a certain extent.
Well, because you were importing some beers at one point.
Yeah, and I was frustrated at the lack of import beers that we could get here and the red tape around that surrounded getting import beers, especially draft beers. Because at the time, and I still think it may be the case, I'm not actually up to date on it as much as I was, but all draft beer coming into the province was controlled by 4 companies, and you could not.
Isn't it still?
I'm not sure.
Pretty sure
it might still be. So you could not have an import draft beer unless it passed through the hands of one of these private companies. And so it was around the time of there was an underground restaurant club. The name escapes me what it was. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool to come up to have an underground beer drinking club? And
not so underground anymore.
And so the Anti-Saloon League was something that was a thing during Prohibition that wanted to stop drinking. Mm-hmm. And so I turned that on its head and I called it the Saloon League because I wanted to encourage underground drinking. And the whole point of it was that we would get friends together and that every event we would tap a keg that we had brought across the border legally, because you're allowed to bring you're allowed to bring kegs with you on your person.
It's just the volume
for personal use. Yep. So we would bring kegs across the border legally, and then we'd tap them in a private place, which made it all above board. But it was like having things like, as you said,
Saison DuPont,
Gumball Head, New Glarus, or Three Floyds, or Sierra Nevada, or we had Vivant from Grand Rapids. All these beers that were not available on tap, impossible to get on tap, but we had them on tap. And it was a really fun kind of cool thing.
And a lot of people came into them. They became very popular.
It was a thing.
And I can remember my most memorable one was the guy who owns Bryden's Pub on Bloor. I know who he is. You know who he is. I'm not going to say his name, but he drank a little too much of Dreadnought and took a little, tried to kiss the sidewalk. But those were always good times. And I just wanted to bring that up because, again, thinking back to those days, it was a group of people who all came to try new beers. And it wasn't always about, like, the beers were amazing, and that's why everyone came for the most part, but it was also just to get together with like-minded people to then say, what do you think of this beer? Or what's going on in the industry? And it was a lot of brewers. It was a lot of people in the industry, but then there was marketers, there was nurses, there was everyone.
It was this period of, like I said,
and you had to have a special invite to get there and know someone.
It was enthusiasm and sort of this really special time. And who knows, maybe now that we're back together again, maybe some new idea is going to be hatched soon.
All right.
So,
well, again, before we get to rapid fire, I'm doing this to myself again. Really quickly, you started a campaign in 2008 called Free Our Beer. Hey, it finally worked, man. We got there.
The beer kind of got freed.
So I was looking back on a lot of that stuff that you did, and you and I went to the Ministry of Attorney General's office. Do you remember this? A long time ago.
I definitely do.
To try to fight for a lot of changes to the Liquor Licensing Act on where you could serve, how festivals could run, and a lot of those ideas that we brought forth actually came about, but it took years. But fast forward, beer and convenience stores is coming. And that was a platform that you were kind of running in 2008 to say, just open up the market. And
well, I mean, the campaign was called Free Our Beer. And that was really the entire idea was in its name. I wanted the beer market to be freer for consumers, for the industry, for importers, for everybody. In fact, that name Free Our Beer, I think, was adopted by the Convenience Store Association.
Well, it was adopted by a member of federal politics out of Alberta who did a Canada-wide tour probably around 2016-17. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, conservative member. And he went around Canada saying, it's time to free our beer. And it was about the modernization of federal tax and interprovincial shipping.
That's it. Somebody, some organization bought one of the domain names that I didn't have, freeourbeer.something, and put their site on it. And my site was on the other domain. Because I think I had the .com and the .org, and somebody got .ca.
So you had a whole bunch of Google ads because you're getting high traffic. There you go. You got a couple $100 over the last 10 years.
But that was all. But it was really just, again, I was in the industry. I could see what was happening. I was doing some importing. And even though I loved Ontario beer, I was frustrated by the import rules, and I was frustrated by, even the local rules around how festivals could operate, and, the stranglehold that the beer store and the LCBO had in the marketplace. And, fast forward all these years, and I think I even sent you a text probably maybe 2 years ago, because I'm like, here's the list of all the things that actually changed. And it is very significant. Going back to beer and grocery, festival rules have loosened.
Taproom rules. You can
delivery. You can drink in certain parks in Toronto. And now, convenience stores and, the case sort of, allowance that is.
You can go into a convenience store, grocery store, and buy a case of beer.
To retail that's coming soon. It is quite amazing. I didn't. There was a time in my life where I didn't think I'd ever see significant change in Ontario, and
here we are.
We
don't know what's gonna come of it, but
I certainly like being able to go to the grocery store and buy beer.
As long as it's fresh.
Yep.
GLB.
I always check.
There you go.
I always check GLB's
package
date codes when I buy my octopus at the beer store or the liquor store or the grocery store. I always check for freshness.
There we go. Okay. In respect of time, we're going to jump into the rapid fire questions. So are you ready for this? Because these are hard.
Okay, let's do it.
Other than Great Lakes, what beer have you been enjoying recently?
Greenwood.
From left field. Okay. Name your celebrity doppelganger. Big pause.
Jimmy Fallon.
A good one. I can see it. Yeah. If you're 20 years younger. Name a person in the industry.
He's not that young anymore.
No, I know. I'm just joking. Name a person in the industry that has inspired you or continues to inspire you.
This is going to sound funny, but one of the first people to ever respond to an email from me when I was just trying to get into the beer world was Steve Beaumont.
There you go. Very good.
He wrote me back when I was in university, and he was a writer at the Star. And I asked him for advice, and he gave it to me. And I'll never forget that. And even to this day, I love chatting with him because he took a couple minutes and gave some valuable advice to somebody who he had no idea who it was.
That's it's cool because when I was a blogger, when I started, probably when I reached out to you when I moved back to Toronto, he actually said, let's go for a beer to Volo. And I didn't know who this guy was, to be honest. I knew he was a beer guy, but I didn't know him from Adam. And for 2 hours, we just had beers and he just gave me some advice. Yep. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks, man. But we've become very close, and that's a great answer. Shout out to Stephen Beaumont. Best time and place for a beer?
Anytime, any place.
All right, that's the first I've heard of that one. If you could drink only one beer for the rest of your life, what would it be?
This has changed over my life, over my beer drinking life, but right now it's probably West Coast IPA, a real West Coast IPA.
Okay, but one beer.
Oh, you mean a specific style?
Sure.
Oh, like an actual...
Yeah. Oh, we'll just go with Octopus.
Okay.
Favorite place to grab a beer in Toronto? Come on, man. This is rapid fire.
for the longest time it was Volo on Dundonald, and now let's go Volo on St. Nicholas.
St. Nicholas. Favorite bar in the world. Now you travel a lot, so you probably have this in your back pocket.
Favorite bar in the world.
This is the slowest rapid fire questions, answers.
I've been to a lot of places.
Blue Monk, which is not around anymore. Coles.
You know what I really love? What sticks in my mind still to this day is Magnolia in San Francisco.
We went there together.
Yeah.
We did.
I love that place.
That was a pretty cool spot. Is it closed now, though?
I think they closed the brewery. They expanded and opened up a new brewery in a different part of town, but I think the original
I remember the bus
Kate
ride
Ashbury
we took
one is still
through
open.
there.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty cool spot. Didn't they have like a big fountain and like you go to the bathrooms or whatever, but there's a big fountain in the middle? I just remember it being a really cool spot.
I mean, again, I know this is diverting from the rapid fire, but I went to San Francisco before, like during their beer heyday.
Yeah.
And like going to Magnolia in Haight-Ashbury was just magical.
Yeah. We went to another place in San Francisco on the hill or around the hill, and there was the sausage place.
Oh,
and it was a very underrated
Rosamunde.
It was amazing too.
Yeah, that was great.
Best hangover cure.
Another beer.
Okay. And that's it. That's it. That's the interview. We're done. Thanks, Cass, for being on the show. It's always great to catch up, man. Seriously, and talk about the days when Ontario Craft was just coming into its own. I'm grateful for this, that we got the time to sit down and have a couple beers together. And I'm grateful that I got into it when I did and that you were part of that and we were in it together. You really do deserve some recognition for the role you played in helping shape the industry. I know everyone at Great Lakes, when we say Cass, they're like Casshole or no, everyone in the industry loves what you've done for us and with us, and thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Troy, you've been a great friend in beer for so many years, and we've worked together across professional things, personal things, great beer events and ideas. And GLB is a brewery that's close to my heart, and couldn't be happier to be a part of this podcast today.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much. All right, we're going to come back with Cole's Notes. Hang tight. Cole's Notes. It's time to hear from our man in the lab, Cole Raiskums, in another edition of his Cole's Notes. This sounds like an interesting one too, Cole. He's going to discuss beer clarification. I'm all ears. Have at it.
Awesome. Thanks, Troy. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another Cole's Notes segment. Today, we're going to learn about beer clarification. So after our beers are done fermenting, we set them to a temperature just above freezing point to cause the yeast to go dormant. However, there are still many particles floating around in the liquid that we don't want in our final beer. So how do we fix that? Well, with a clever use of filtration mediums and fluid dynamics, we keep the lagers in your glass crystal clear. Hold on to your hats, because before we jump into how it works, we need to talk a little bit about physics, specifically fluid dynamics. Stokes' law of settling measures the net downward force of a sphere in a Newtonian fluid, which is a fluid whose viscosity is independent of shear rate. The parameters affecting this force are the radius of the particles, the density of the particles, the liquid density, and the acceleration of the particles. In our case, the particles we're interested in are mainly composed of yeast cells, proteins, and polyphenols. The higher the downward force, the faster the particles settle and the clearer the beer. Since we can't effectively manipulate the liquid's density, that leaves us with 3 other parameters to play with. So finding agents are one way we can clarify our beer. The way they work is they bind to the particles in the liquid, bringing them together into larger clumps. Remember that increasing the particle size and density positively influences the settling force, leading to clearer beer. Common finding agents we used in the brewing industry include isinglass, gelatin, and polyvinyl polypyrrolidone, or PVPP for short. Another way to clarify our beer is by changing the acceleration of the particles. Naturally, the only acceleration particles experience is gravity, and we can't really go changing that without creating many other issues. So what are we to do? Well, what we can do is introduce centripetal force with a centrifuge, causing inward acceleration of the liquid when we spin it really fast, like 6,600 RPM fast. This leads to all the particles in the beer being literally pulled out of solution. The neat part is, depending on the flow rate through the centrifuge, we can control how many particles we pull out of the beer. So, if we want a crystal clear lager, we run the beer through the centrifuge very slow to increase the spin time and pull as many particles out as possible. But if we want a hazy beer like Haze Mama, we run it through the centrifuge very quickly. So the large chunks are pulled out and the stable haze particles stay in solution. Finally, the last way we can clarify our beer is through filtration. This involves sending the liquid through a size restrictive medium to block any large particles coming through while letting the smaller ones pass. Common filtration mediums include diatomaceous earth, which is literally fossilized algae, or a variety of polymer membrane filters, which can vary in size from 5 micrometers to a fraction of a micrometer. So if you haven't fallen asleep or turned off the podcast yet, I promise next week's segment won't be as technical as this one. Who knew science could taste so good?
I'm just joking, Cole. That was great. There were some big words and terms used, but I think I got the gist of it. Chunks bad, right? Yeah?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, good. Okay. Thanks for doing the heavy lifting for us and making our beer so delicious. Thanks again, Cole.
No problem, Troy. Take care.
Cheers.
Hey guys, it's Sadie here from Great Lakes Brewery with some really exciting news coming for you this summer. We're happy to announce that on August 24th, we're going to throw our first ever large-scale craft beer fest right here in beautiful South Etobicoke. It's called Brewed for You Fest with 20 plus breweries and cideries, some of our closest pals in the industry. We're excited to have Shannock Road doing an amazing Celtic rock set, as well as my personal favorite, a 90s throwback set by the band Discman. Brewed for You Fest here at Great Lakes Brewery on August 24th. Go to greatlakesbeer.com for details.
Around the industry.
We have a couple things to talk about in Around the Industry this episode. I want to give a big shout out and happy birthday to Royal City. It's their 10th anniversary. They're throwing a big party, or they did throw a big party, I should say, at the time of recording. This past weekend, they featured 10 different collaboration beers. So they had 10 different breweries come up and brew with them for, you get it, 10 years. One of those was with GLB. Our team was up there last month to help whip up a hazy IPA. Cam, little known fact, Cam started his beer career at Great Lakes on the packaging line and wanted to be a brewer, and look at him now. 10 years with Royal City, his brewery. So congratulations to them. Over to LCBO, July 5th, that's the date LCBO workers will go on strike if an agreement can't be reached in time. Now, it's worth noting that they've never gone on strike, and so hopefully, fingers crossed, that'll continue. But in anticipation, the LCBO has announced extended hours leading up to the 5th, with stores opening at 9:30 a.m. and closing at 10 p.m. Should they strike, stores will be closed for at least 14 days, with some rotating stores opening 3 days a week. The AGCO and the Ontario Convenience Store Association announced that almost 1,900 stores applied for a license to sell beer in the first week of registration. So on June 17th, that was the first day that convenience stores could go on to the AGCO site and apply for a license. So we could see 300 plus by the end of July. So we're closely monitoring that. Farmers markets are back across Ontario. If you're in Toronto, check out which parks allow consuming on site, because if they do and Great Lakes is there, our beer is going to be in a cooler. It's going to be nice and cold. You can crack beer to enjoy on site. And continuing on in GLB news, Miami Vice White Pale Ale that Cass is crushing while we record this is now available across Ontario at LCBO stores. This popular seasonal is only here for a limited time, so act fast. Sunnyside Session IPA is also now available in 70 plus beer stores across the province. You can grab a case there for only $60. It's on a seasonal SKU, so it's going to come and go. And on Saturday, July 6th, GLB Etobicoke is hosting our annual Barks and Brews events, a dog social for a dog rescue, dedicated, It's a weird flex here on how they wrote this, but anyway, it's an event for dog rescue, saving dogs in needs. More info at greatlakesbeer.com. That's it. That's all, folks. Episode 13 with Cass Enright, the ideas guy, has moved from the mash tun to the fermenters. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Cass and appreciate all the work he has done over the years highlighting Ontario craft beer. If you want to go analog, I don't know if that's the right term, but head over to bartowel.com to see what that form is all about. No, he's shaking his head. No, just go over to bartowel.com and join in on the chatter, where you might be able to find the very first recipe for Crazy Canuck Pale Ale. Thanks, Lackey. Today's episode was fueled by cans of My Beer of Summer, Great Lakes Premium Lager, and by Miami Vice, which I mentioned Cass was crushing. Both beers are available all across Ontario at LCBO stores, beer stores for the lager, and at select grocery stores. You can also get them online at greatlakesbeershop.ca. You can visit the brewery at 30 Queen Elizabeth Boulevard in Etobicoke, or grab some delicious eats and fresh pours at our brew pub at 11 Lower Jarvis Street, Toronto. If you have any content you'd love to hear us discuss on the show, or just want to tell us what you're drinking, drop us a line at podcast@greatlakesbeer.com. Thanks, Neil. Until next time, please remember to keep tipping your glass of fresh GLB in the right direction. Supporting local never tasted so good.